Welcome to another episode of Cal's Corner radio show here on the X Zone Broadcast Network. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host and the executive producer of the show. As I always say, because it's true, it's the one and only Rob McConnell. Folks, as you know, on this radio show here, Cal's Corner, we cover everything from politics to the paranormal. So let's do a quick update on politics, and then we'll cut to a subject which I think most people care about, at least according to the polls. And we'll get back to that in just a moment. Quick political update. It seems that there's been some backlash against the media contrived controversy, if you will, stunt, whatever you want to call it, the way they were fawning all over themselves to bend over backwards to praise the late Senator John McCain when he had his funeral. We talked about that last week on the show here. Again, folks, my position, which I think I can defend with facts, is if you look at the media's coverage of McCain over the years, it's kind of been hypocritical. They used to hate him when he was in opposition to Barack Obama or anything the liberal media didn't agree with. But of course, they fell in love with him all over again, which shows you, how moral they are, I guess, or ethical, when he started opposing Trump. And it didn't matter what the issue was. The fact that Trump was being opposed was the issue. And I find that rather ironic in today's political situation in American politics, because I, like most Americans, want my government to function, not only work, but function properly. And that's a big challenge for many of today's governments, unfortunately. And in the case of the United States, excuse me, we need to put an end to this, everything from the revolving door of lobbyists and people who serve in government who come in and out of service and go work for companies and find loopholes to get around that, and of course enrich themselves. And then, of course, there's never a thorough investigation as to why it is that this amazing phenomenon occurs that when people enter service in the U.S. government, by the time they end it, they're usually far more wealthy. I mean, it's like all of a sudden they get an extra brain in their head and they're just whizzes at the stock market and they know exactly where to invest. It's too much of a coincidence to think that there's just sweet, pure light and innocence going on there. No, it's a form of corruption because a lot of these guys have a input on what laws get passed. Therefore, it's pretty obvious where to predict where the piles of money are going to go, especially pork projects, and especially if you're sending them back home to the district you represent. I think probably the late Representative Murtha was probably the epitome of some of the corruption that went on in this front. And of course, he wasn't an exception. He was just one of many. And he's no longer around to be held accountable. And of course, the deep political people that run the Democratic Party and also on the Republican side, they don't want to dig too deep on that issue because so many of them are guilty, let's be honest. So there, again, has been this backlash. People were saying, they don't surveys were indicating that many Americans didn't buy the dog and pony show. That's refreshing to hear that. On the other hand, some polls are indicating, and again, it's way too early to tell, folks. There's no way to psychically predict this, no matter who you think is the best psychic in the world. There's no way to say for sure how the upcoming November election is going to go. But it does seem that there will be this historic swing back the other direction. It usually occurs in midterms, at least in the United States, where a party is popular during one election, but then due to vote or whatever, it doesn't get as many votes, or maybe the people don't take that midterm election seriously as the election every 4 years, say for president. It's on a different scale, of course, and that allows the other party to exploit that. And you've got people like Barack Obama jumping back into the fray, and of course he has a considerable very powerful election machinery that he's managed to more keep in place than not. You combine all of that and the fact that Trump's approval rate seems to be stuck around 44%, no matter what he does. And it seems like there may be a case where the blue party or the Democrats will take back the Congress, at least the lower house of it. Probably not the Senate. But of course, they're promising all kinds of things. Nancy Pelosi is promising investigations up the wazoo against the Republicans. And this is where I find their words to be full of hypocrisy. I remember, as do all Americans, I think, and even a lot of Canadians, they were frustrated with the Republicans, and rightly so, when they would vote against everything the Democrats would do, even when the Democrats were right. And that is wrong in principle. It shouldn't matter what political party is championing an initiative. The initiative should rise or fall on its own merits or lack of. Therefore, if there's a tax cut that is being proposed by the Democrats or a tax increase, whatever it is, if it's the right thing to do, then the other party should support it. You should put the interests of your country first. Your self interest shouldn't even be in the picture. But of course, it doesn't always work that way. In fact, probably more so than not, it doesn't work that way. And that's the problem. So remember that the Republicans were given the deserved nickname. They were being mocked as being called the Party of No. And that was an accurate way to describe them. They were so determined to destroy and help implode Barack Obama's presidency that even when he was doing things that were right, they were still against it. They were not putting the best interests of their country first, even though they were lying to the world and saying that they were. Now you have today's situation where Queen Hillary lost the election, much to the shock and dismay of half the country and the so-called liberal media, especially, and those so-called experts. They all predicted a landslide by Hillary. Didn't happen. Even the New York Times bid on that stupidity, ran with it, ended up with egg on their face, ended up actually apologizing for their coverage of the election, promised to be more objective going forward. I'm not sure that they've managed to pull that off, but anyway, you now have this polarization, and you now have the Democrats who have become the party of no. And of course, they remain silent on key issues that they just don't want to address. For example, they still credit Barack Obama for the present state of the U.S. economy, that it's still Barack Obama's doing. Well, that's kind of funny because they used to get mad when the economy wasn't doing so good and they'd still blame Bush. It was never Obama's fault because, again, if you criticize Obama, you were a racist, quote unquote. That's some of the stupid rhetoric that came out of their mouths. And that's an extremist view because it's absolutely a falsehood. And it's wrong to stereotype people that way, just like it's wrong to call all Trump supporters as racists or white supremacists, because most of them are not, by far. And that's just a fact. But the left doesn't want to admit that. Just like it's wrong to call all left-leaning or left-wing types socialists, they're not. In fact, of those who claim to be socialists, it's obvious that they don't understand basic history, and they're not even using the term correctly anymore, but that's today's millennial generation. So this is what's been going on. There's been backlash, and then now you have a new book that slams Trump, only this time it's not written by somebody who might be considered to have an axe to grind, like the last couple of books that have come out, which have credibility problems that have been exposed by even the anti-Trump media. This one is by Bob Woodward, who's a top investigative journalist. The book is called Fear, and it's the inside story inside the first roughly year, a little more than that perhaps, of the Trump administration. I admit I have not read the book yet. I have yet to receive my media copy as a journalist. I will read it when I get it, but I have read some of the comments about it and excerpts from it that have been in the main press. And of course, the White House is denying anything negative that's in it. That's to be expected. On the other hand, you have to admit that the source of this book is a very credible journalist. I've always admired his work, and I've always enjoyed reading his books. They've been very insightful and very accurate. In fact, one of the things that's always fascinated me about Bob Woodward's books, and I have several of them in my library, of course, is that he doesn't put footnotes or endnotes in his books. None. They're not there. And then, well, how do you know he's telling the truth? Well, he claims to have tapes and other notes and documents to back up all this stuff, and I have no doubt that he's telling the truth when he says he does. But I, as a journalist, am torn between the proper etiquette of, in a book, you're supposed to put endnotes or footnotes. That's why I spent a lot of time putting hundreds of them, over 1,000 of them, in my Meyer expose, which was around 420 pages roughly when it was published. You go through that work. It's tedious. I don't enjoy it, but it had to be done. And that's because you want to provide a way where the reader can easily verify what you're saying one way or another. That's the purpose of these references. On the other hand, you can write things in such a way where it's kind of obvious where the source info comes from, and it still empowers a reader to go ahead and know how to independently check what you're saying, especially if they're going to disagree with it. And when you're ever authoring books which are on controversial subjects, you have, I think, an extra responsibility to do that type of thing so that once again, how a reader who is digesting your material, taking time to study it, whether they believe it or not, go through it, you need to empower them to be able to, again, confirm or verify it one way or another. So I found that interesting. He doesn't use them. I don't know if that's still the case in his current book. He's written nothing but bestsellers on different presidents over the years, and a lot of people consider it to be an honor if they're referenced or quoted in his books. I'm just giving you some of the background info and the history behind it, and that's why the denial by the White House is rather interesting. It's very predictable, but I also predict, with my limited understanding of this, that it's not going to go on for too long, because they're taking on somebody that I don't think they really want to do that. It's one thing to dismiss the reports by somebody who worked on your staff. It's another thing to try to take on the big editor, head honcho at the Washington Post. You're not going to be successful. All right, we'll be back after this commercial break, and then we'll continue with Cal's Corner online here on the X-Zone Broadcast Network.
Whether you're a skeptic or a believer, join me, Rob McConnell, as together we'll investigate the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology here on the X-Zone Radio TV show on XZBN and the X-Zone TV channel on Simul TV. Since 1990, the X-Zone Radio TV show has been the place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. Together, we'll investigate UFOs, aliens, ghosts, Bigfoot, psychic phenomenon, lake monsters, conspiracy theories, government cover-ups, the truth embargo, alien abductions, ESP, haunted locations from around the world, and so much more. With over 28 years of broadcasting and more than 4,500 individual guests, the X-Zone is truly a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality, as evidenced by the credibility, integrity, and professionalism of the guests that we bring to our international audience. If you have seen a UFO, had a close encounter, seen a ghost, Bigfoot, lake monster, or a story that you would like to share or have investigated, contact me, Rob McConnell, by sending me your email to xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, or you can call toll-free 1-800-610-7035, extension 143, and on Skype, X-Zone Radio TV. For more information on the X-Zone Radio TV show with yours truly, Rob McConnell, visit www.xzoneradiotv.com or www.xzonetvchannel.com or simultv.com and xzbn.net. Until next we meet here in the X-Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, always remember, X-Zone Nation, keep your eyes to the sky and your heart in the light.
You have heard of the X-Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X-Zone, sci-fi, and horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games, No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand, live streaming events from around the world, interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
Welcome back to the second segment here on Cal's Corner radio show here on the X-Zone Broadcast Network. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host, and the executive producer of the show is Rob McConnell. Now, let's switch away from what we were talking about at first in the first segment of the show, and let's switch to a subject that most people have told me, at least, and I think surveys support this, at least in the minds of voters. It has become the number one issue on everybody's mind, and is not only the case in the United States and Canada, but in much of Europe as well, because it is truly a global issue, a global phenomenon, and most importantly, a global crisis or epidemic, if you will. We're talking about the subject of illegal immigration or illegal migration. And let's start with the very term itself. Unfortunately, many of us now subscribe to the idea that we need to be what is euphemistically being called politically correct. Now, I want to talk about that for a second as we move forward on this, because if we don't agree on the right terms, there's no point in even doing this show. And hopefully those who disagree with me will understand the logic here and change their mind, because that's the point of going through this point, which I think is obvious. I'm not saying I'm an expert on this. I don't profess to be. I have, however, done a fair amount of reporting on it, and having traveled around the world and having been to 27 different countries, I have a firsthand diverse experience on several different continents with this very issue, and that is of migrating or moving and living or relocating to other countries and nations and dealing with the different laws that cover that. Now, in today's politically correct world, which is another way of saying phony, I don't believe in being politically correct, and I never will. We don't have illegal aliens. They don't exist anymore. They've magically, poof, disappeared. We don't have illegal anything. We have instead undocumented workers. Even if they're not working or holding a job, they're still undocumented workers. Well, that's a bunch of nonsense. If they are documented somewhere. So don't tell me they're not, okay? They weren't born in a vacuum. Somebody knows who these people are, including the countries they come from, the families they're with, or whomever. The point is they're not undocumented anything. Just because I may not know who they are, or a police officer at the border who catches them crossing into the country illegally, he may not know who the person is. They may never find out for sure who the person is, but he's documented somewhere, so he's not an undocumented anything, okay? You can say he's an unknown, but he's documented somewhere. So stop using that term, because it's plain stupid. It doesn't make any sense. And words are supposed to mean something. Otherwise, there's no point in having words. There's no point in forming sentences. There's no point in having a language. Duh, hello. So what are these people who cross the border illegally, go into another country, do whatever? Doesn't matter. The point is they've crossed the border illegally. They know they're breaking the law. What does that make them? It makes them a criminal. But why does that upset the left when you say that illegals are illegal? Why do they hate that term when they, out of the other side of their mouth, will say we stand for truth, liberty, justice for all? We uphold the spirit of the law. You know, that's the great point of America and everything else. Yeah, well, they don't. When it suits them, they do. When it doesn't suit them, they just ignore it. Well, that is wrong, of course, and they complain about the other side doing that, even though they do the same thing. So my personal view is, if someone's in the country illegally, there's nothing wrong with saying he's an illegal person, he's an illegal migrant. He's not an immigrant, because an immigrant follows the system. There's an immigration, there's a Department of Immigration in all countries, okay? and they handle immigrants who come to the country legally. They file papers, they pay their fees, they go for their interviews or whatever the requirements are. I've been through these things myself, so have many friends of mine who travel. It's just commonly done. So if you're illegal, you're not an immigrant. You're a migrant in that you're migrating, moving from one place to another. But not all migrants are legal, not all migrants are illegal. It depends on the individual, their circumstance. To use an analogy, just so maybe it'll stick in your head if you are resisting this, it's like a UFO sighting, okay? Not all UFOs are flying saucers, not all flying saucers are UFOs. The logic here is obvious. Same with migrants and immigrants. So they're not illegal immigrants because that's an oxymoron. That's like saying I'm a little bit pregnant. Doesn't make any sense. They're illegal migrants. Now, what about aliens? Well, see, in today's culture, you got to be careful because, an alien might mean somebody from the mythical Roswell UFO crash of 1947, right? Okay, we're that kind of a culture. We've degenerated to that level now where the word alien needs a clarification, okay? What kind of alien are you talking about? An alien from another planet or an alien from another country? Well, good question. I don't have any problem by saying they're illegal aliens. They can be illegal, they can be legal aliens as well, okay? But they can be illegal aliens. In fact, the moment they cross the border, break the law, they're criminals, they're illegal, and they're aliens. Look up the definition of alien. It fits someone who's not from your country. It fits somebody who's not from your world. That's where you need context. So why does the left, again, have a problem with basic English? I don't know. Ask them. It's really stupid. Again, you can't sit there and claim you follow the spirit of the law and you're all about, helping people and, making sure that people keep their word when you're not even speaking proper whatever language you're speaking. All right, so then what do you do with these people? Well, unfortunately, the United States has never had a sane immigration policy. Remember, folks, we kind of started in a huge contradictory way. In fact, when I was learning history growing up, and I love history, I've always been an A or A plus student in it without exception because I just love history. I've written reports in school that were hundreds of pages. I just love history. Well, here we were, a nation that said, all men are created equal, right to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. But of course, our founding fathers were slave owners. That's a huge oxymoron. It's a moral contradiction that unfortunately was true. And of course, the slaves weren't free by, say, George Washington, the first president of the U.S., until after he died. Then he freed them. So here we were, a country that was supposed to be founded on equality, equal rights, free speech, no racism, freedom from religious persecution. On the other hand, we had slaves, slave owners, of course, fought a civil war. The slaves were officially freed in the middle of that war, roughly. But yet it took another 100 years under Presidents Kennedy and Johnson to enforce civil rights, where you could have people of different races mixing with each other, and it was okay. It was always supposed to be okay. Women ended up having the right to vote only last century. You can go on and on and on. Again, that is the way America was and has evolved as a nation. So what do you do when you have never had a sane immigration policy? You've got a nation that was built and founded in part on racist views, among others. It's not the only view out there. In fact, everyone's copying America, so America must be doing something right. Nobody's busy trying to copy communist China or North Korea or Russia. They're trying to copy America. So what has happened is you have two parties now who run the country, and I argue that they're running it into the ground with the help of voters. They keep voting these clowns into power, then they complain that nothing changes or it gets worse. You have the Democrats on one side, and you have the Republicans on the other. And I'm a fan of neither. I don't support either. I've never been a my party right or wrong type person, and I support individual politicians and initiatives, but not all or nothing, because there's no perfect person. You can disagree with a politician on issue X and agree with him on issue Y. I don't care what party they belong to. I care about the principle and the policy. because that's ultimately what matters. Now, we are seeing in the United States the rise of independents. These are people who aren't sure what party they want to belong to. They are having their doubts about either one. They seem to want a viable third party alternative, but not enough so that they actually get off their collective butts and go make one, which they could do. They could create a party, but they're not. Instead, I guess they're hoping for some super politician to fly in on a cape and save their butts, and that's not going to happen. It just doesn't work that way. And then let's say you end up with a president who leads no party, he's an independent, but he has to deal with the Republicans and the Democrats. Well, then you're going to have two parties of no who are probably going to try to sabotage that person, even though he's doing the right thing. That's the type of degenerated scenario that seems to be dominating politics. So you have Nancy Pelosi, who very badly wants to return as Speaker of the House. She has promised a gazillion different congressional investigations if the Democrats win Congress. Well, that's just what the public needs. More hearings, right? More soapbox circus hearings. It's going to be over the same issues over and over again. Just like you can count on the Republicans to always want to investigate Hillary Clinton, you can always count on the Democrats to want to investigate Trump. Right now, they're staying quiet on the impeach issue because they don't want to upset voters and they think his base is going to be complacent. They're letting the media, such as the recent book by Woodward, attack Trump and do their work for them, working through proxies, while the Democrats are still trying to figure out, as a party, what they want to be when they finally grow up. I predict they'll never answer that question. All right, we'll come back after this commercial break and we'll continue on this.
From our broadcast studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, to the world and beyond, you're watching the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net.
AVS Media Demo.
You have heard of the X-Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X-Zone, Sci-Fi, and Horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world, interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365. Rob McConnell here, presenting an overview for Nicholas Paul Jennings, author of a fascinating book, Amen. It presents facts revealed by Egyptologists, facts that enable us to understand why Amen is the beginning of creation of God. It provides recommendations for religious leaders of the major religions to unify their beliefs and teach the Word of God. Love one another. Amen informs people how mankind conceived God. It was the Egyptians that developed the concepts of a soul, a hereafter, and Son of God. And finally, after the worship of many gods, they conceived the belief in one universal God, the maker of all there is. For more information, visit www.futureofgodamen.com. That's www.futureofgodamen.com.
Welcome back to the third segment here on Cal's Corner radio show here on the X Zone Broadcast Network. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host, and the executive producer of the show is Rob McConnell. Excuse me a second, I have to clear my throat. Excuse me. All right, much better. Okay, we were talking about immigration. What do you do with these people? How do you handle it? Again, you've got two political parties who approach this issue very differently. This would be the Democrats, who many of them no longer believe that borders are even necessary. The idea that you can have a country without borders is, again, an oxymoron, at least based on the way that we define countries currently in our language and vernacular. And yet they believe in open borders, that people should have this universal human right to wander around anywhere that they see fit. Now, I will tell you that that would be great in an ideal world. It would be wonderful if you could get on a plane, land in China. Let's say you wanted to visit that, just show up, wouldn't even have to show your passport or didn't even need a visa. Then you could go around and do what you want and then leave. But China's not that way. It's a communist country. It's actually a totalitarian capitalist country, which means it has very little freedoms. And of course, if you do normal stuff over there that is taken for granted here in the West, you go to jail if you're lucky. So that's what happens over in China. So as long as we have countries like that, as long as we have enormous gaps in the standards of living and the types of governments that run these different countries, we're never going to have this utopian, unrealistic, unicorn type idea that there's no need for borders. Now, one of the reasons that Donald Trump is sitting in the White House now instead of Hillary Clinton is because he got enough of the voting base of the population of the United States to cast their ballot for him. And he did it riding the coattails of hot button items, issues like immigration reform. Other than the economy, polls have indicated that most Americans care about immigration reform and they want it badly, and they blame both parties for playing games with it. Now, what games do the two parties play? Well, each side will deny this, but it's not the first time they'll lie to the people. They make a habit of doing it. The Democrats, in my view, and I've reported on this over the years, and I think the evidence has long been in, I'm not the first one to come up with this idea, they don't really care about the issue of immigrants. They don't. All they care about is your vote. They know that about 80% minimum of illegals who are in the country or connected to immigrants will vote for the Democratic Party. So they're interested in turning the demographics of various Republican states, so-called red states, into what are called purple or blue states. A purple state is one that's transitioning between red or blue, because red and blue makes purple. Arizona, ironically, which is the state that the late Senator John McCain represented, it was considered to be many times hardcore Republican ultimately. Well, it's now becoming a purple state. The Democrats are looking to change it into a hardcore blue state, and of course the Republicans are holding on essentially for their future, trying to keep it from switching out of red. Now, if you look at the demographic map, other than population, Trump pretty much carried middle America, and most importantly, he was able to carry all except just one, essentially, of the so-called blue wall states that the Democrats have traditionally carried, states like Wisconsin. Hillary didn't win that state. In fact, she's never won it, period, including both times she's run for office. Trump won it instead. So he was able to flip the states that traditionally vote for Democrats. The Democrats were arrogant, they took those for granted. And what you have is by Trump saying he's going to build a wall, and construction of a wall has started, a lot of Americans support the idea of building a wall. That is a wall that goes across the border with Mexico. The reason they support that is because they understand that nothing else is working, that the program itself, immigration laws as they exist, with this catch and release insanity that was codified as official policy during the Barack Obama presidency, most Americans have never supported that, and the Democrats have been stupid in embracing it because it's wrong. You don't sit there and catch an illegal, give them a ticket and say, now you come back to court on this date, I'll see you then, when over 90% of them don't even bother showing up. And there's no way to track these people. And if you give them a ankle bracelet, they'll just cut it off. That's happened many times. On the other hand, it's wrong for Trump to stereotype these people and act as if everybody coming across the border is some hardened criminal. That's just not true. In fact, most of those coming across the border, as far as I know, based on official statistics, have no connection to crime at all. So it's wrong of Trump to paint people in a racist fashion that way. And he's been condemned for it and should be. So you have both examples here of both parties playing games. The Republicans know that the conservative mindset, the number of people following organized, established, big-time religion today, we're talking about people who follow Christianity, Catholicism especially. That's the largest denomination of Christianity. But they're losing members now at a faster rate than they ever have in modern times. Even in the Middle East, there's a record number of people dropping out of Islam who are young. They just don't feel like wearing that turban. And I've seen that even in India. I've seen young Sikhs who said, I don't want a beard down to my knees. Excuse me, Dad, I'd rather have no beard at all. And I don't want to wear a turban. It's 120 degrees out there and it's uncomfortable. Whatever the reason, I've heard it all, I've seen it. You see these changes starting to occur. So the Democrats are counting on demographic change, racial change, to essentially ensure that they'll become the only viable political party. Their dream is to help exterminate, literally, or render forever harmless in a permanent minority status the Republican Party, and especially the right-wing component, or so-called conservatives or neoconservatives of the Republicans. Now, I will tell you that I have my problem with both sides, because I believe that they're extremists on both ends. It depends on the issue. I get frustrated when I hear modern progressives tell me that we don't need a military, that California should be divided into 3 or 6 different states, that it doesn't need a military either because the federal government will come to its rescue, that there shouldn't be any taxes, that everything should be free. You know, these people have no idea how to pay for all of this stuff and how taxes seem to work. Instead, it's tax the rich. Well, it's not that simple. How do you tax them and on what grounds? You better be very careful. That's true with trying to tax any group. But the one thing that both these parties have just been fantastic at is destroying the middle class, because they ultimately don't care. They're not doing all the right things to continue to stop the implosion of the middle class. And it doesn't matter what country you are. When you have a middle class that is no longer dominant economically, the future of that nation is in serious jeopardy. It is not sustainable. Let's say you get down to 45% of the middle class and 55% live in poverty. How are you going to grow and change those dynamics as a country? And for every year that you don't, things get worse. So what you're seeing is the fact that finally in the United States, due to demographics, both everything from the number of people who speak English or speak another language, Spanish being the main one, you have a lot of Asians coming in. I'm talking about people from both China, which is really more Oriental, as well as India. And if there's one country right now, other than the United States, which is experiencing, let's say, blowback from not having a responsible immigration set of laws, and the blowback is now coming back from voters, it would be Canada. And I'm not an expert on what Canada is doing. I am an American, of course, and my country's on the other side of the border. But when I saw that the current Prime Minister, Mr. Trudeau, and everything he was talking about before he got elected and became the Prime Minister about all this pie in the sky stuff, I thought, this is even more loopy than what Obama was talking about. At least Obama may have known better. I'm not sure that Trudeau does. So let's talk about what's going on in Canada. We'll do that for the rest of the segment, and then we'll finish off the last one as well. Now, I'm going to read a brief quote from Trudeau from a speech he gave. It was an inspiring speech. Let's give him credit. He said, "Throughout our history, Canada's immigration policy has brought people here who had a pathway to citizenship. They were and are nation builders. It has been supported by political parties of all stripes and promoted by successive governments over generations." Now, this is what Justin Trudeau said in one of his many speeches. Trudeau, of course, is head of the Liberal Party, and it holds a majority of seats in the Parliament, empowering it to pass many critical policies and dominate even in regions where it doesn't have much support, such as in the western provinces of Alberta and Saskatchewan, Canada. So when Trudeau became Prime Minister in 2015, his government initiated sweeping changes that both facilitated and increased the numbers of immigrants flowing into Canada. While his relaxed border policies were initially popular with Canadians, most of them have now soured on Trudeau and many of his views. Now, it wasn't always this way. Trudeau was initially considered to be the rough equivalent of Barack Obama in Canadian politics. He just wasn't black. His Liberal Party's winning campaign slogan was, quote, "Real change now," was very Obama-esque in its nature. Remember that Obama ran on the slogan, "Change we can believe in," or just change or real change. Well, there's again, Trudeau's was real change now. So once he was in office, Trudeau eagerly reached out to the United States, and of course a receptive and welcoming Barack Obama was waiting for him. The two became so close that the press began to mock the two when they were together, calling it literally a bromance. We'll be back after this commercial break, and we'll finish off with Canada and Mr. Trudeau.
You have heard of the X Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X Zone, sci-fi, and horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world. Interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
Whether you're a skeptic or a believer, join me, Rob McConnell, as together we'll investigate the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology here on the X Zone Radio TV show on XZBN and the X Zone TV channel on Simul TV. Since 1990, the X Zone Radio TV show has been the place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. Together, we'll investigate UFOs, aliens, ghosts, Bigfoot, psychic phenomenon, lake monsters, conspiracy theories, government cover-ups, the truth embargo, alien abductions, ESP, haunted locations from around the world, and so much more. With over 28 years of broadcasting and more than 4,500 individual guests, the X Zone is truly a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality, as evidenced by the credibility, integrity, and professionalism of the guests that we bring to our international audience. If you have seen a UFO, had a close encounter, seen a ghost, Bigfoot, lake monster, or a story that you would like to share or have investigated, contact me, Rob McConnell, by sending me your email to xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, or you can call toll-free 1-800-610-7035, extension 143, and on Skype, X-Zone Radio TV. For more information on the X-Zone Radio TV show with yours truly, Rob McConnell, visit www.xzoneradiotv.com or www.xzonetvchannel.com or simultv.com and xzbn.net. Until next we meet here in the X-Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, always remember, X-Zone Nation, keep your eyes to the sky and your heart in the light.
Welcome back to the fourth and final segment here on Cal's Corner radio show here in the X-Zone Broadcast Network. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host. Once again, the executive producer of the show is Rob McConnell. Now, folks, as I was saying, when Obama and Trudeau met, they met at the White House on March 10th, 2016, for their summit in Washington, D.C., once again at the White House. And the press had a field day touting it as a bromance, quote unquote, a left-leaning liberal love fest, if you will. Now, exaggerations aside, public perception, right or wrong, can be cruel, and it can fire off summary judgments. So soon, Obama would leave office, and Trudeau was now in the tender mercies of Obama's successor, President Donald Trump. So one of the key reasons that Trump was elected president over Democrat Hillary Clinton, as I was saying earlier in the show here, is because of his stance on certain hot-button issues such as immigration. During Obama's 2 terms as president, immigration policies were schizophrenic at best. The infamous catch-and-release program didn't win Obama and the Democrats any new fans. In fact, they had been deservedly and have been deservedly condemned over it. Now, one key irony concerning illegal immigration during Obama's 2 terms in office, again, he was president for 8 years, is that while record numbers of illegal aliens entered the United States when Obama was president, record numbers of them were also deported under Obama. Go figure. Now, another move Obama's administration made, which I argue remains a cowardly surrender to being what we can euphemistically call politically correct, was when the Obama administration essentially banned the use of the term, again, illegal alien, to describe people who enter the USA illegally. Now, most Americans, understandably, they disagreed with this decision as well, and they roundly mocked it. By every definition of enforceable law, illegal aliens, at least this term, are exactly this, meaning they are people who enter a country illegally. They are not immigrants, they are instead migrants. Immigrants are people who, as I said earlier, formally migrate to another country via a legal process such as filing for a residency visa. Now, if the term illegal immigrant is allowed to keep its perceived credibility, then one might as well legitimize other nonsensical and oxymoronic terms, with emphasis on the word moronic here, since terms such as legal criminal or to validate such illogical notions is just pure quackery. It's about as credible as calling a bank robber. It's like saying a bank robber, it's wrong to call him a bank robber, even though he robbed a bank, because you might hurt his feelings. If they're in the country illegal, they're illegal, period. Okay? So, most people favor calling things what they are. There's a reason that a dog is called a dog, a cat is called a cat, and most people would have a problem if you called a dog a cat and vice versa. In fact, I've done this experiment on my own. There have been times where I see somebody in line and I see that they've got 3 or 4 cans of cat food, and I'll, as a joke, say, "Oh, what kind of dog do you have?" And they'll look at me like I'm crazy. "I have a cat. Can't you see I'm buying cat food?" Of course I can. But it was my way of testing that little idea, and that is that people like things to be called what they are. The problem with politics today is that politicians aren't doing that. They're calling things anything but that. And because of that, things are so convoluted that when they talk to voters who know better, they begin to lose respect for those politicians, and a lot of people just end up dropping out of politics. Now, if you look at what's going on in Canada, because Trudeau made the policy to openly take most of those who were kicked out of the U.S. or were just trying to pass through the United States to go ahead and get into Canada. Well, unfortunately for them, for people trying to do that, Canada has an agreement with the United States that if somebody wants to get into Canada and they're transiting through America, they have to go back to America to apply to get into Canada. But they can't get back into Canada or America because they'd be illegal, and they can be arrested when they go to apply to migrate to Canada. Do you see how this can get very convoluted? This has actually been happening. So when you look at what's going on with the number of legal immigrants into Canada, you are seeing that Canadian culture is being transformed from, let's call it white, for lack of a better term, to distinctly non-white, Asian or Oriental. Now, as of the year 2015, okay, so this has been true since then. There's been about 241,000 known illegal migrants and legal immigrants resettled in Canada. In 2016, the number rose to 323,000. In 2017, it dropped to nearly 273,000. Okay. Now, what's interesting is this is a lot, not only a lot of people, but look at the racial and ethnic breakdowns. Okay. In 2015, 115,625 men were taken into Canada versus 9,500 more women. Their numbers equal 125,216. So there were nearly 9,500 more women admitted in the year 2015 to Canada than there were men. So the idea that these are all war refugees or whatever just isn't true. Now, in the year 2016, 165,183 females versus 157,990 males were resettled in Canada. In 2017, which is the last complete year we have statistics for, of course, a total of 140,913 females were brought into Canada compared to just 131,753 men. So what this means is that over time, folks, the birth rates are expected to now increase in Canada in regions where these migrants are settling. And if you look at their ethnic and racial backgrounds, you find out that in 2016, 668,565 of these people were Indians from India who migrated to Canada, many of them from the state of Punjab. I moved to the state of Punjab in 2010. They were followed by 649,260 Chinese, then another 588,305 Filipinos. There were 499,115 British. There were 257,715 Americans. There were 236,640 Italians, 208,940 citizens from Hong Kong. They get their own category. Another 202,260 were from Pakistan, India's neighbor, and 169,250 of them were from Vietnam, and 154,425 were from Iran. And most of these people were between 25 to 29 years old, and that is the sweet spot, genetically and age-wise, folks, timeline-wise in one's life, that a country like Canada would want these people because it's the cream of the crop. The second oldest group of all these people I just mentioned by their statistical breakdown were the 30 to 34-year-olds. So Canada is sitting in the catbird seat, immigration-wise. It's got the top two sweet spots, 25 to 29, 30 to 34, and it's got millions of these people coming in over the last few years. And because of their ethnic and cultural backgrounds, you can see how they're going to, especially in a generation or two, have completely transformed Canadian society as it is known today. And this is what's going on. And if you look at what's happening in Canada, a lot of Canadians don't like it. They want you to learn English or French, depending on what country you're going to live in. They say that there's a way to act Canadian, but they don't really define it. but they're now telling migrants that they feel, at least in surveys when they're asked, that these people coming in aren't acting Canadian enough, whatever that means. And if you look at what's happening in Canada, you see that for the first time, Trudeau is losing his grip on power. Recently, the Conservatives were able to win some political seats in Quebec. And of course, now about 70% of Canadians, according to polls, feel that there are too many asylum seekers entering the country. And it is now becoming the most important primary issue for many voters heading into the main elections. If you look at Europe, the same thing is going on now. The so-called socialist paradise, Sweden. The far right is about to win the election over there. And guess what, folks? They're anti-immigrant. Because the whole issue of the massive influx of migrants and immigrants, legals and illegals, aliens and legal, again, migrants, and legal immigrants, what has happened is the issue has not been handled responsibly across the board. Look at the chaos in Germany. And Germany is a very organized state. A key foundational part of German culture is a concept called Ordnung, which means order. And the Germans pride themselves on that. So do the Swiss. You try going to a restaurant anywhere in Germany 1 minute past the time they're supposed to close for lunch, and you ain't getting in. Trust me, I've seen it firsthand. In Switzerland as well, they're right down to the minute. The trains run on time. A very orderly society. But did they handle the issue of bringing in over 1 million war refugees, essentially, from these war-torn countries? No, they didn't. They blew it. And what has happened is there has been a rise of Donald Trump-type figures from the far right now who have gained unprecedented power since World War II ended in Germany. It's happened in Hungary. It has happened in Sweden now, which is supposed to be a socialist paradise. They're upset over what is happening with out-of-control, ridiculous migration and immigration policies, just like the U.S. is still struggling with that issue, and it will as long as you've got these two parties in power, and you have Canada, in theory, trying to do the noble thing, but out of touch with the reality or realpolitik of what's going on in the world around it. Canada needs to do things if it wants to preserve some of the stuff that it considers to be Canadian, whatever that is. I don't know. I'm not a Canadian. I've just heard this from many people, and it was quite interesting to hear these statistics. All right, thanks for joining me. We'll be back next week for another episode of Kal's Corner.
Whether you're a skeptic or a believer, join me, Rob McConnell, as together we'll investigate the world of the paranormal and the science of parapsychology here on the X-Zone Radio TV show on XZBN and the X-Zone TV channel on Simul TV. Since 1990, the X-Zone Radio TV show has been the place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. Together, we'll investigate UFOs, aliens, ghosts, Bigfoot, psychic phenomenon, lake monsters, conspiracy theories, government cover-ups, the truth embargo, alien abductions, ESP, haunted locations from around the world, and so much more. With over 28 years of broadcasting and more than 4,500 individual guests, the X-Zone is truly a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality, as evidenced by the credibility, integrity, and professionalism of the guests that we bring to our international audience. If you have seen a UFO, had a close encounter, seen a ghost, Bigfoot, lake monster, or a story that you would like to share or have investigated, contact me, Rob McConnell, by sending me your email to xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, or you can call toll-free 1-800-610-7035, extension 143, and on Skype, X-Zone Radio TV. For more information on the X-Zone Radio TV show with yours truly, Rob McConnell, visit www.xzoneradiotv.com or www.xzonetvchannel.com or simultv.com and xzbn.net. Until next we meet here in the X Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, always remember, X Zone Nation, keep your eyes to the sky and your heart in the light.
You have heard of the X Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X Zone, sci-fi, and horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world. Interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.